Welcome to the Success Sculpting Show with Stephen Pierce, bringing you the right information right now to sculpt a more meaningful and memorable life of success. Join us each week to discover gems to help you grow your mental toughness, expand your will to win, and multiply your results. It's never been easier to learn what to do and how to do it to succeed at what you choose to do. This is truly an experience you won't find anywhere else. Now, here's your host, the Success Sculptor himself, Stephen Pierce.
All right, everybody, welcome to today's Success Sculpting Show. And man, do we have a treat for you today. Today's guest, he came up the easy way. No, I'm just kidding. He came up the hard way, man. He rose from a poor inner city street kid living in public housing on welfare with no father in the home to becoming a 2-term city councilman in Missouri and traveling to nearly 40 countries around the world promoting humanitarian, educational, and cultural exchanges. Now, I know you're probably impressed already, but hold your hats, because he also has 6 advanced degrees. Man, I'm shrinking. I'm just starting to shrink. He has 6 advanced degrees, including a doctorate in education, an MBA, and a law degree. Not only that, he's the first African-American executive named partner shareholder in a top commercial real estate firm in the history of the state of Missouri, shattering a glass ceiling that existed since Missouri became the 24th state on August 10th, 1821. Listen, I'm excited. You should be excited. You're probably trying to find out, does this man get 48 hours in one day? Listen, welcome everybody, Dr. Troy Nash, to the Success Sculpting Show. Dr. Nash, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stephen. It's good to be here. Good to be with you.
Listen, my first question is this, because you obviously make a big investment in yourself. How important is it for people to invest in themselves if they want to succeed?
Well, I think it's the only way you can succeed. Everything starts with you. And you rattled off a bunch of things there, but as I listen to you, I'm reminded it's really a very simple formula. I just got tired. There's just no 2 ways about it. I got tired of living the way I was living, looking at the things that I was looking at, smelling the things that I was smelling in the hood, right? So I just got tired.
Right.
So there's no sort of magic bullet or magic star. I just got tired and I did something about it. I said, I better get off my butt and do something because nobody's going to do it for me. So I just started down that path, man.
Wow, that's awesome. And I look at your background, and it's interesting because if you look at your background, there is nothing in your background that would have ever predicted that your life would be as phenomenal as it is. You would have accomplished the things you have accomplished, impact the way you created impact, contribute the way you've been able to contribute. There are a lot of little boys, young men of all types of nationalities, mainly African-American, with your background, but a lot of them are in prisons or headed to prison, if not dead. What did you do differently that allowed you, coming from a background with no prediction of success, to becoming what it is you've been able to become?
Well, that's true about the statistics, young brothers. You know, I come up in a time when the crack wars were just starting. And there were people in my family, to be sure, that were pharmaceutical reps. You understand?
Yeah, right.
We had various locations throughout the community peddling that garbage, but the reality of it is that's not how I saw myself. In fact, I actually challenged the conventional wisdom and members of my clan, or my tribe, as I say. Of course, I got booted out and still not been able to make it back in, so to speak. But as I said earlier, just really having enough, just taking enough. I got tired of saying things like, 6'4" or 6 foot black male or African American male, associated with criminality. And I remember just sort of shrinking my shoulders down a little bit so I can be 5'10". In other words, and then hearing things like we're an endangered species. Of course, I didn't know, coming from the ghetto, you don't know what that kind of stuff means. And so I looked up endangered species and I saw a spotted owl and a snow leopard. Well, I knew I wasn't an owl and I knew I wasn't a snow leopard. And when I began to read about what an endangered species was, that meant that my life expectancy, that my life, literally the essence of who I am, the creation itself is at jeopardy and could go away. And so I worked to change my set of circumstances. Now, to be sure, nobody does anything by his or herself. So beware of the guy or gal who comes up to you and say, I did it all by myself. Well, this is not true, but for the farmer growing the wheat, right? We wouldn't have bread. And so for me, the United States Air Force was the way out. So as they say, the rest is history. And so, picking up a new hustle, really, the military taught me this school thing, turned me on to this school thing where if you read and you write and you do arithmetic, people give you stuff. And I wanted stuff. I mean, really, it's very basic stuff, right? And so I started to do it. And then what I discovered is that I could read and I could write and I could do it reasonably well. So they give you more stuff. And so my theory was very simple. As long as they kept paying, I was going to keep going. And so I did. And when I looked up, I'd compiled all these pieces of paper. And I said, well, I wasn't going to read anyway because I enjoy reading. You might as well get a piece of paper every 24 months saying that you enjoyed reading.
And look, if you put it that way, if people are like, wait a second, if I read, I write, I do arithmetic, I can get some stuff. But I wanted some stuff, man. And so I've since sort of grown past that materialism phase. But in all seriousness, though, it really, education was the way out. I enjoyed the mental and intellectual stimulation. And so, as I said, I was going to read anyway, so I might as well get a few pieces of paper along the way. And then the idea was really also to share that with others. When I returned from the service, I went home and there were my brothers, and I love them more than life itself. And they were doing their thing. And this is all I could hear was, that sound like that. Said, oh, hey, my gosh. Right.
Hey, man, what's wrong with you, man? You're a little different since you've been away in the service. And I said, man, what are you talking about? They say, you know what, man? You talk like white people now. You ain't down with us no more. And I said, no. I said, it ain't like that. I said, check it out. I got a new hustle for us. And then, because I had to talk in language that they would understand, right? This is where we were. I don't know about your household, but this is where
I hear you.
And so, and they said, what's that? And I said, this school thing, man. And so I shared it with them. And, man, they laughed right in my face.
Wow.
Right in my face. And that was a painful time, really, because I really, when something good happens to you, you want to share it with those you love, right?
Right.
And so I remember getting in my car. Steven said, you know what? I've had enough. And, man, something said, turn that car around. And I did. And I would work with my 3 older brothers for a year, converted my little ghetto house into a school, and went to the thrift store and got the books and helped them get their GED. And my mama saw what was going on. She got her GED at 55.
Wow.
And one of the days of my life, man, was when I enrolled my 3 older brothers into college and the university for the very first time. And I would go on to literally recruit hundreds upon hundreds of people in my community to go. And the university, about 2 or 3 months ago, awarded me with what they called their Define the Odds Award, which I didn't know anything about, for my efforts to do that. So really, it started with me personally, then with my family, and then branching out to help others. And there was no sort of master plan to do it. I figured if it worked for me, it can work for these other brothers and sisters, and really people of every race, because education is really the bedrock and the foundation for what it is we're able to do.
In hearing that, you know what, you really just embodied an old saying. I don't know who said it, Gandhi or whatever. They said, be the change that you want to see in other people. You know what the quote I'm talking about?
Yeah, that is Gandhi.
Yeah, okay, so you if you would have came in there with weed in your hand, talking about the same thing, talking about this education thing, it would have been hard to buy into that because you hadn't gone there yet. So the thing is that a route when people look at their existing environment and they don't like it, they don't like their current circumstances, they're waiting for the circumstances to change. They're waiting for someone to come rescue them. They're waiting for something external that they have no control over to come in and give them the escape route, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm going to go do this thing myself. Rather, other people want to do it or not. But they have a better opportunity of influencing people the way you did. I mean, that's phenomenal. Your older brothers, your mom at 55, and then other people who, think about it, if you did not go and embark on that education, those people probably would not have their GEDs or be enrolled in college. And I guess the point that I'm coming to is looking at ourselves and what we need to change, because that change is going to have an influence on other people, what we do as opposed to what we keep telling people we want them to do.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, as much as I run my mouth, I actually talk very little in that sense. I think it's all about what you alluded to, and that is being the example. The bottom line is, when people still, even when I got elected and I'm traveling around the world and doing all this stuff, some of the guys would look at me from the hood and they go, "For real? You?" I mean, seriously. And I always put my hand up to my mouth and I go, "Shh, don't tell them, don't tell them." And I'm kidding, of course, but the reality of it is it starts with you. And you just simply have to make up your mind and throw your arms up and say, "I've had enough." And then to take one little action and to understand life is not a straight line, man. It is just as crooked a path as it can be. You're going to have ups and downs, but they don't tell you that when you start. So really what you have to do is really dig deep down into yourself and reprogram your subconscious mind. I didn't realize how ignorant I really was until I started learning stuff.
Wow.
I was like, man, I'm kind of dumb. I mean, I mean that. People, I don't remember. No, you're not dumb. No, I was ignorant. I didn't understand how the city worked. I didn't understand how the world worked. I didn't understand how the country worked. I didn't understand all these different pockets of power and influence. I didn't understand the racial thing to the extent that I would come to understand it, although I was bused from the inner city to the white school as part of a large desegregation plan. But even then, they were just poor whites. We were just poor blacks. In other words, so you don't see all these things at the time, but what you do see, or I guess I should say what you do feel, is different about yourself when you start to achieve one thing by taking one little small step. And I'll never forget in the military when I competed in a contest. I'd never competed anything in my life, and I won. Wow. And they started to clap, and now that felt pretty good. And in order to get more of that, you had to do more of the other stuff. And so my point is, when you're recognized for your efforts, your self-esteem goes up. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Does that make sense? In other words, when you do something good, it's almost like this positive reinforcement that you have. And so again, I agree that it starts with you, but I also agree that we have a responsibility and a moral obligation to reach back and help others. I mean, to me, that is the essence of what life is all about. All these awards and accolades and achievement and money and real estate and all that kind of carrying on, that stuff will go. But to your point, the legacy that you create in the lives of others really is what is meaningful to me.
Right. And you mentioned reprogramming your subconscious mind. For the people that are listening and they're like, okay, well, what's my subconscious mind? Or they're like, okay, I'm aware of my subconscious mind, but how do I go about reprogramming it so I can get off of this path of error and correct myself and go in the direction I truly want to go into? How do we go about doing that?
All right. Well, now here's where it gets a little rocky for some people. I mentioned to you the story I had with my brothers. In other words, I had a choice. I could leave and not come back and enjoy the fruits of my labor and just say, look at me, or I could put forth a conscious, deliberate effort to go back to help someone else. In this case, I went back and they responded. One would go on to get his bachelor's degree and master's degree, another a bachelor's degree. In fact, my mother died of hepatitis C, an awful disease, when she was 65. Do you know my mother was a junior in college? She went back to get her GED too. I studied with her and we got that thing, and the university awarded her degree posthumously, and I was able to receive it. So I had to put forth the conscious effort to go back. Now, here's the thing. You can lead a horse to water, but what's the saying, Stephen?
You can't make it drink. You
can't make them drink. Now, see, in the old days, I'd put your head in the water. And I'd do it and have you sort of force this thing on you. But as I got older, I moderated. Now, what you have to do to plant this in your subconscious mind, because that's the question, you have to put forth a conscious, deliberate effort to improve yourself. Part of improving yourself is surrounding yourself with people who have dreams, who have hopes, and who have ambitions. Not people who are going to belittle you, not people who are going to put you down, not people who are going to talk about your mama, not people who are going to do all that negative stuff.
Right.
People who are serious about success. Now, what this means as a practical matter is sometimes you're going to find yourself alone. And if you can deal with that, then you're well on your way to success. When you don't allow other people's feelings and thoughts and emotions to infect your own, oh, brothers and sisters, you're on your way.
Now, that brings up an important question. A lot of us and people in society, we are so socially conscious. We do more to try to survive our social environment and all these different personalities than go about doing what we need to do to create the ideal life that it is that we want. So how does a person become focused in this world that is so socially distracted, not just offline, but online? Because people are living their lives through these fake reality TV shows or through people's YouTube videos
right.
or their Facebook posts, or they're trying to be something they're not by posting stuff to get some kind of feeling. And to your point, like, you got positive reinforcement when you were doing those good things. How does a person break free when their fake friends are giving them this positive reinforcement that really leads to a path of nowhere, and they remain lost, constantly chasing that feeling?
It's a very good question. And I want to be clear here. Listen, I'm no shaman or no talisman. In other words, I don't have all the answers. I just can share with what worked with me and the few people that I've shared it with. I want to put that on the record. But here's how I will answer that question. You have to write your own story. See, and for me, I can only speak about that story from an African-American male's point of view.
Right.
Now, for me to ignore 1619 to 1865, and from 1877 to 1965, from 1965 to today, and not understand my story, my history, my legacy, is to not be a full person today. What do I mean by that? All I had to do was be born in a different time. And through no fault of my own, the system was structured such that I couldn't even dream. You understand?
Yeah.
In other words, it's been a horrible experience. And so when you get here today and people say, oh, look at you now, or you're different, or you're one of them, man, I get offended. And in as polite a terms as I can, I tried to educate folks and say, no. I was just given an opportunity and I did something with it.
Right.
But there's a lot of brothers and sisters out here who are extremely creative. In fact, history is replete with examples of contributions that African-American men and women have made to this country, and they don't necessarily get their just due. And so I want to be clear here that success, it's what it is. And it's one thing to say anybody can do it. And at some level, that's true, particularly in this country. But the reality of it is there are still barriers out there. There's still racism out there. There's still jealousy, hatred, and envy of others out there that you have to deal with as a practical matter on your road to success. Now, they're overcomable. You can achieve still, but do be mindful that it's not all unicorns and puppy dogs.
Okay, right. No unicorns, no puppy dogs, but real fears. What does a person do when they hear what you're saying, they see the opportunities, but something in them has them fearful of the ridicule, of the disapproval, of the backlash, of the racism, or of the biases, or whatever it is that's sitting out there as a form of resistance? They know that on the other side of it is what they want, but overcoming that fear to face those things that scare them is something they just haven't figured out. How do they deal with that?
Okay, no, not so much how you deal with it. How do you defeat it, right?
Okay.
In other words, I've never failed at anything I've ever tried. Now, I mean, isn't that a mighty, amazing assertion? I've never failed at anything. And do you know why I say that?
Why that?
It's because when something doesn't work out, I tried something else. So I kept failure at bay. It was never going to catch me. It's not going to catch me today. If I try something and it didn't work out, it just didn't work out for that day. That doesn't mean I'm a failure. But I've also had many successes. And so if you develop kind of this attitude about yourself and about life, you at least put yourself in a position to overcome it. But let me give you some sort of practical ways to do it. It starts with manipulating your subconscious mind. If you sit at home every day and you watch useless, meaningless television, listen to useless, meaningless radio, talk to useless, meaningless people, chances are you're going to be useless and meaningless. I mean, really. So you've created that environment. So what I do is I listen to motivational kinds of things, inspirational kinds of things, encouraging kinds of things. I surround myself with uplifting, positive people. I don't even have cable TV because I ain't got time to sit there and watch people yelling and screaming at each other, pumping all this negative energy in me. And so what I've done is I've convinced my subconscious mind today, not focusing too much on the past, not living too much in anticipation of the future, but today, understanding that if I'm able to reprogram my subconscious mind by filling myself up with good stuff is going to come out. And let me tell you, it has worked for me and I've seen it work for others. So it's very basic stuff, but it takes you understanding that, particularly in the early days, because when you're successful, everybody was with you, right?
Right.
You know how that, right?
Yeah.
But in the early days, you have to understand that you're going to have to be your own best friend. Understand?
Yep. So let me ask you this, because there's the group of people out there. They want to go do that, right? It's like the person that's addicted to horrible foods, addicted to sugars. And they're like, hey, look, I know I need to shift this food I'm putting in my body, but the addiction and the taste and the cravings for the bad food keeps calling them. And when habit meets desire, and unless there's something strong enough, habit wins all the time. So here's the question. As it relates to food, changing your nutritional diet, how does a person who gravitates so much to entertainment as opposed to education, that gravitates to the mindless television, the mindless music, the mindless conversations, and they're addicted to it. They crave to check their Facebook or to tune into the fake reality television shows. How do they break free from that when they've been so addicted to it for so long, and they know there's no good is going to come of it? They get what you're saying. How do they make that turn so they can start reprogramming their subconscious mind and doing the things that you're talking about while the gravity is pulling them towards the negative? Right.
Well, that's the struggle. I mean, that goes back. That's a classic struggle between good and evil. Our good side and
Yes.
our bad side. And so it's a much deeper question, frankly, than I'm qualified to answer. I can only share with you in my limited experience what has worked for me. Okay.
Beautiful. Yep.
And so it goes back to what I said earlier, and I'm going to reiterate it because I think it warrants repetition and it's important. You have to begin to think differently. Now, in other words, it's not enough to change your thinking and then have your habits be the same, is really what I hear you saying. So how does your thinking change habits so that once that action occurs, you are a different person?
Right.
You literally have to drench yourself in this stuff and you can't come out. And when you have that temptation to go eat that pizza. Say, for example, I work with a guy, Michael Lasser. He's a professional trainer, and we did a program together, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, where we were some of the honorees. And I got to talking to him, and he looked at me, and he kind of made me mad because I thought I was looking pretty good. He said, "You're skinny fat." And I said, "Skinny fat?" He says, "Yeah, most men hold their weight around their stomach and their hip." So I went home and I took off my little old suit and I looked, and man, lo and behold, I was skinny fat. And he looked at my body fat percentage and it was 23%. In other words, 22% of my body was fat. You mentioned food, which made me think of this example. Today, I'm 10% and I'm on my way to 10% body fat. Now, the question then becomes, how did I develop a mindset, a habit that led to actions to go from 23% to 10%, right?
Right.
He gave me a food schedule, a menu of choices, and said, if you follow this roadmap and eat 6 meals a day and eat this food and that food and that food, it will work. Now, every day, somebody calls me out to lunch, says, you want to go eat, and they'll chow down a big old hamburger or a Philly steak or a big old thing of spaghetti. And all I could think about is when my mama used to make that spaghetti and put mushrooms in it. Did your mama do that, Stephen? Put mushrooms in the spaghetti?
I don't know what she put in the spaghetti.
It was die for it. So when I'm faced with that reality, I think to myself of how horrible I felt when I would eat that food late at night and wake up in the morning with this heavy bloated feeling. That doesn't happen anymore. with this new diet. And so I associate that pain or that unpleasantness with in getting myself involved with that particular action. So therefore, I don't take that action anymore because I don't want to feel that way. I think it's that fundamental with eating or with smoking dope or using drugs or going out chasing after these guys and girls that you know ain't no good for you. I mean, addiction can come in many different forms.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think that once you make that connection in your mind, no matter how insignificant it is and no matter what the issue is, if you can do it that one little time, you have to tell yourself, if I can do it one time, I can do it 10 times. If I can do it 10 times, I can do 100. And before long, it becomes a habit that leads to different actions, which leads to a different life and lifestyle.
You know, what you said is extremely powerful, and I want to make sure everyone picks up on that. One of the things that helped you to make the change was in the moment, you were not focused on the pleasure of the activity. You were focused on the pain of the after effects.
Exactly right.
Right. So the thing is, when a person is faced with that temptation, shift their focus from the immediate pleasure and go towards how bad they're going to be feeling afterwards.
Wow. Frankly, I think you said it better than me because that is true. In other words, fire can either cook your food or burn down your house, depending on how it's used, right?
Right.
Pain could either propel you forward or you can wallow in it and remain there, And so what I did is I knew that I didn't want to go back to the set of circumstances that I grew up in. And that was painful for me on many, many different levels. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized the impact that it had. I had to unlearn so much junk. And it was painful because I remember my mama saying things, which I won't repeat here, that now that I listen to it, I mean, it was against African-American or Black-owned businesses, right? I mean, these are stereotypes that are passed down. And I thought to myself as I was writing the policy for the state of Missouri's $2.2 billion housing finance agency in terms of minority participation and women participation, et cetera, I thought about that and tried to reconcile those two thoughts and go, wow, I was really learning the wrong stuff. So you have to unlearn all of that pain, right? And use that as a catalyst to propel you. Watching negative TV, just all those things that feed negative energy into you and frankly waste your time, which is the most precious commodity that you have, are not good for you and make that the enemy.
Well, you mentioned pain and you mentioned that word repeatedly, and there's something about your life with all of the accolades and the achievement and everything you've done that's been pretty phenomenal. You've also had pain. You've been through divorce, betrayal, failed relationships, moving away from your faith, and then coming back all the way to meeting global business leaders and political leaders and thought leaders from around the world. So my question is, how do you persevere in those times of trouble when the pain is the negative pain, when the wind has been knocked out of you? Maybe it's the divorce, maybe it's the betrayal, maybe it's the slander, whatever that deal is that seems to be like, okay, man, this is over. I mean, this is it. How do you push back? How do you persevere? How do you overcome it?
Wow. Very, very good question. In the early days, these kinds of external activities would literally elicit a physical response from me. In other words, my stomach would drop or my throat would tighten up. I mean, really, this actually happened to me. And I had no idea that this was even possible. And then as I got older, I learned to absorb that. In other words, as my world expanded, I really adopted the philosophy that this too shall pass. I mean, in all of our lives, I think about where I was 10 or 15 years ago relative to where I am today. That's progress. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so for me, I've always turned to books. Right. This is before audio books. Right. So a book allowed me to escape in a world that was beyond my physical environment. Right. And so as I got older, you mentioned divorce, things like this. When this happened, I seek knowledge. I mean, that has become a part of my personality. And that is sort of my coping skill to gain more knowledge, to gain more insight, and to develop a fuller understanding and appreciation. As I said, this too shall pass. And once you understand that and fully accept it, man, when things happen to you, you go, it's called life. In fact, when things happen to me, I actually enjoy it now. I mean, I know that may sound somewhat weird, but I enjoy it because it gives me an opportunity to sort of test my negotiation and intellectual acumen and sort of figure out how to solve the problem. So for me, it's mental calisthenics, right? It's just working out. Yeah. So and you can make a game out of it. So whatever happens, I'm like, bring it on. It's just my turn in the hopper. I probably did something way back when to deserve it anyway, Stephen.
Okay, so here's the thing then, because that's an interesting perspective that you have. Okay, so you embrace it. A lot of people, their problem is they're having problems. They don't want to have any problems. They for some reason they want the tiptoe through the tulips. They want it to be smooth sailing, you know, flowers and rainbows. How can a person like your mindset brace themselves to expect the problems and look for those problems and use them? Because right now it seems like you actually, nothing can disturb you because you're accepting all things that come because there's a way for you to use whatever is happening, good or bad. How can we adopt that mindset and not always have this bias towards it has to be good and it has to be this way, it has to be my way, and if it's not, then it's all bad, I'm in trouble, I'm down, I'm depressed. How can we adopt that mental toughness like you have that says, hey, good or bad, I'm using it?
Well, this is going to get me in trouble with some people, I suspect, in the future. But, today there is a pill for everything. I mean, there is a pill for everything. Yeah. And I'm a history buff as well. And history is replete with examples of people who have overcome extraordinary odds. I mean, frankly, the things that we go through today pales in comparison. But the reality of it is we've created a culture of dependency. And you mentioned a lot of them: social media, this negative television, other people, and these kinds of things. And again, the answer is the same as the previous 2 or 3 questions. It all starts with you. You have to put good stuff in your head in order to get good stuff out in life. There's no other way. Think about it as a practical matter. You can't put bad stuff in and expect good stuff to come out.
Right.
I mean, it's very simple.
Right.
And so what you have to do is put forth a conscious, deliberate effort to say no more. Enough is enough. This relationship is not working for me. This guy's got to go. This woman has to go. These friends that I have, they're nice and they're good people, but they ain't going anywhere. And so you got to sort of put them in a different category. I want people who can help me grow, who can help us. Les Brown's fond of saying, make that mental leap from where you are to where you'd like to be. So you have to change your surroundings. You have to change your friend circle. All these things. You have to read positive material. You got to buy the Stephen Pierce podcast. I mean, it's just stuff you got to do. Right. And you got to put all that good stuff in you to push all that life junk out of you. And when you do it, the way you see the world fundamentally changes. You no longer see problems the same way. The problems are still there. The world is still there.
Right.
Everything is still there, but it's how you see it. So it all goes back to you. And if there's one thing that I want to leave you with, and certainly your listeners with, is that taking personal responsibility for your thinking, for your minds, for the very thoughts that you have, is something that is really fundamental to you being a new person.
So let me ask you, I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying, and you're talking about looking at the relationship, and it's like, hey, this has to go, that has to go, starting to prune off all of these things that are not good for you. And what I hear is something that it seems a lot of us are lacking today, which is honesty with ourselves and honesty with what's really going on. We don't really want to be honest with the people that are in our lives because we want to either be socially correct or politically correct because people find reasons to be offended. If you're telling the truth, they're offended. So you can never get to the truth because you have to deal with their emotions about them being offended. And then for ourselves, we won't be honest with ourselves. For example, you talked about you had 23% body fat. Now you're down to 10%. Well, there are people that are overweight and people want to say you look good. Well, because they don't want to be mean and say, no, well, you look rather fat and nasty. Now that can be harsh, but the lack of honesty keeps people in weakness. So help me to understand how can we be more honest with ourselves? Because until we're honest with what the situation is and what really needs to change, we'll continue to make excuses and thus continue to compromise and remain in the same place, although for some strange reason, we are expecting things to be different.
Very, very good question. Stephen, listen, I have faced and overcome many obstacles in life, just like you have and just like many other people. So there's no news story there. But it reminds me of a cartoon that I saw once, and I think you'll like this. There were two booths that were set up. One was entitled Comforting Lies, and the other booth was entitled Unpleasant Truths. And in the Comforting Lies booth, there was a long line all the way out of the door. And in the Unpleasant Truth booth, the guy sitting there with his arms crossed and his hand on his face because nobody was standing in his line. In other words, you're right. People, well, let me just put it this way. Rather than talk about people, I just talk about myself. You know, it's tough really facing yourself. The bottom line is I'm probably the most broad-based, narrow-minded person you'll ever meet. In other words, I have a sort of a variety of things that interest me, but in a very narrow context. Certain things in our society or in our world, in our universe, just doesn't interest me. And so therefore, I don't involve myself in those activities. And so some people will look at that and they judge me mentally. Some people call that being judgmental, which I'm totally okay with and fine with. You have to find that thing that's the essence of who you are, your passion. For me, it's education. It's helping other people find their purpose. It's helping other people develop a positive mindset. To do whatever it is they want to do, whether it's corporations, nonprofits, associations, right. Military and armed forces organizations, campuses and university settings, you name it. Going into those places and selling self-esteem, to me, is of the highest order and fulfills my purpose. And so each person needs to find that thing for themselves and not worry about what other people are doing or what other people are going to say about what they're doing.
Wow, that's beautiful. So let me ask you this. You're a man that has it together in many ways. Now, obviously, none of us are perfect, but there's no denying what it is you've been able to accomplish. And that takes a great degree of energy, focus, and discipline. So I'm wondering, do you have some type of daily rituals or morning routines or things that you do habitually to keep you on track and keep you focused and keep you making the progress that you've made up to this point and the progress that you're looking for into the future?
You know what? It's a good question. And it's almost like the question that people have asked me my whole life. And that is, well, how did you do it? And they mean well. Nobody's trying to be offensive or belittling or cute. Right. But to me, it's like, people quit. It's no big deal. If a man is hungry or if a woman is hungry, he or she will find a way to feed him or herself.
True.
Okay, bottom line. And so when you get tired of living the way you're living, you will do something about it. Okay. Now, your question is about scheduling and all this stuff. Man, I could not tell you how any of this stuff is possible. All I know is if somebody said, be in a classroom at this time, I went. And I enjoyed it. I liked the learning environment, the interaction, the asking questions, learning from other people. So it worked for me. And I discovered that if you do that over many years, as I said earlier, every 24 months, they'll give you a piece of paper saying, hey, you've been in this class for 2 years straight and get it. And so we call that education. And we have a tendency, in my view, to make it more than what it is. It seems to me in this new changing global technologically advanced economy, entrepreneurship is where it's at if America is going to maintain its primacy going into the 21st century. So, I start off my day with positive stuff, right?
Awesome.
I started this deal on social media after having a conversation with my daughter, Ariel, about some of the things that she was watching on social media. And I said, I wonder if I put a positive message on social media for 1 year, every day for 1 year, what would happen? Man, I did it. And that thing took off and blew up. And now, I've compiled them all into a book and I post Motivational Madness Symposium where I get to sort of share some of these ideas and the like. And to me, it took me about 5 or 10 minutes every day to do that. Now, this helps me start my day off in a positive way. I don't turn on the news and listen to Robin stealing, killing, and all this kind of stuff, and then have the person say, well, you go out and have a nice day. Well, it's kind of hard to after hearing all that garbage.
Right.
To reprogram my mind. And then during the day, I come across the normal problems associated with being an entrepreneur and the real estate business executive. But beyond that, that stuff's just called life. We talked about how I deal with that. And then when I go home, my day really starts where I start working on things that I'm passionate about, like this book that I'm doing, dealing with African-American boys. It's called The Little Black Boy's Guide to Success, 40 Soft Skills for a Hard Reality. We're in there to talk about some of my struggles. You know, Stephen, nobody taught me how to shave my face. And when I joined the service, they handed every guy there a piece of plastic with a piece of metal on the end and a packet. And all the other guys opened the packet and started putting stuff on the bottom part of their face. Well, dummy here, first of all, bit the packet open and put it on his whole face and just commenced to rubbing that thing up. And you can imagine what I looked like when it was over. I mean, that's a true story. No one taught me how to tie a necktie. I didn't know how to tie a necktie. And of course, you know, here I am, the leader of my squadron or my platoon. You know, all kind of things like that, where I was just ill prepared to deal with a productive life according to Western convention, because I've been to enough places around the world, everybody don't live like we do. But it's just things like that. So that's the passion. So that's what I do in the evening. I start my day off positive. I deal with all of the turmoil and chaos that any typical day will bring any of us because of the uncertainty of it all. And then I get off of work, so to speak, and then I start all over again on indulging my passions, which are all designed to really uplift and inspire and help other people.
That's beautiful. And I want to talk about your actually 2 books that you have, but real quickly, what book are you reading right now?
Oh, that's a good question, because you know I have an incredible book list. All right. I mean, and now I don't really read as much. Well, I do have some in my famous reading room, which we all have a famous reading room in our house there. But I do a lot of audio books, right?
Okay. Fair enough.
So one of the ones that I've listened to before, but I'm sort of focusing on now and breaking it down into smaller chunks, is The Alchemist by Pablo Coelho, right? Yeah. It is a fantastic book about a little boy named Santiago who lives in southern Spain, who wants to travel to the pyramids. And all along the way, he's experiencing all of life's ups and downs, only to get to the end to find out that where he's from really is where his treasure is. And so that's a good book. It's an inspirational kind of a book. So that's the one I'm reading now. I'm on my second read of Dennis Kimbrough's book, How to Grow Rich, The Black Choice. That's a good one there. I did some W.B.E. Du Bois stuff. I did some Carter G. Woodson stuff, The Miseducation of the Negro stuff, Up from Slavery, I mentioned. Booker T. Washington, just all that kind of stuff. Right. But I'm always reading something.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us about your 2 books. You have 2 books that you're working on right now.
As I mentioned, I started doing these positive posts, and fella says to me, I want to join your posse, right? And I said, what, my positive post posse? So we started calling it the Triple P, right? And so I created this thing called the Triple P Challenge, where I challenged people in the social media world to put positive things on social media every day. And I created criteria. It's on my website and that kind of thing. But I started posting these things every day to encourage people to be proud of who they were and to be comfortable expressing themselves in a positive way, rather than being so comfortable expressing themselves in a negative way.
Right.
And I did that for 1 year. Well, it was immensely popular, built up quite a following, and had several requests to put it in the form of a book, which I have done, which will be released January 1st of 2018. And then the other project I mentioned to you, The Little Black Boy's Guide to Success, 40 Soft Skills for Hard Reality will also be released in January. And then there's some larger projects. I'm working on one with my mentor, Hugh Zimmer, here in Kansas City, who's one of the most successful developers in the region, sort of took me under his wing. And we're doing a real estate book together.
Nice.
And there's another one that'll probably be ready in 2020. And it's a thicker book. And it's talking about having the opportunity to come from the background that I came from and meeting all these world leaders and all these people. It just really encourages people to focus on sort of the broader world rather than just being so insulated to what's going on here in our city, in your city or our country. So there's a great big world out there, and we have a role in it.
That's beautiful. There's so much to your life, to your story, and what people can learn from you and the contributions you can make to them, and then how they can make contributions to you. We'll definitely love to support your books that are coming out. How can people get in touch with you, Dr. Nash?
Well, what they can do is they can go to troynash.com, have a website there that obviously has a contact form, or they can email me at troylnash@gmail.com. troylnash, one word, @gmail.com. And what I do is I typically take some time on the weekends to go through and respond to as many as I can. And of course, I'm probably about a month or two behind, but I will always respond, because the idea really is to live your life consistent with your purpose. And my purpose is to help inspire and uplift others so that they can fulfill their purpose.
That's beautiful. And I'm going to leave the last word to you, Dr. Nash. So in parting, what would you want to leave the audience with?
Well, I think I want to leave the audience with with you. I've had an opportunity to learn more about you and to learn your story. And it is one of the most inspirational stories. It seems like we've come up in similar backgrounds, but frankly, you've had some things happen to you that I'm sure your viewers are familiar with that are very significant, and you've been able to overcome them. And so to have an opportunity to visit with you, to talk with you, and get to know you has been a real joy.
Well, it's been a real joy to meet someone, Dr. Nash, like you, that values intelligence, that values education more than being entertained and looking at what it is you can create for yourself so that you can give, as opposed to create for yourself that you can keep. I mean, we live in a world with a great deal of diversity, but a lot of that diversity is seeking its own, as opposed to, and it's seeking its own. It's not that that's a problem, but it's seeking its own to just run off with it, as opposed to how can we make, at least the world that we're in touch with, a better place. And yet we do come from similar places, yet different places, because being African-American men in this country, there's a lot of biases against us. We can act like they're not there. But the fact is, look, they're there. We walk into a room, they look at us differently. That's just how it is. You can choose to ignore it. You can embrace it. I embrace who it is I am. I've come to appreciate, as you have, a lot of the things that I've gone through. And I think one of the biggest things to take away from here, especially with your story, your history, the legacy that you're on track to leave, is that wherever you come from, you don't have to circle back and that becomes your destination. Like you're not circling back to the ghetto. Right. You're not circling back to the street life. That's not where you're going. You're not going back to being in the inner city, living in public housing. That's not going to happen. So I guess I want everybody to look at your life, listen to your story, and not be just intellectually stimulated by it, but start to look at themselves and say, you know what? Listen, Dr. Nash had all the disadvantages. Right? All the different advantages. And he didn't use one single disadvantage as an excuse to not perform, as an excuse to rob, to steal, to lie, to do all the negative things that other people with your background have done. You took a different, like you said, change your mindset. Our mindset is our responsibility. What we think is our choice. It doesn't matter who's trying to influence our thinking. We get to decide in terms of the finale what our final thoughts are going to be about anything. And when I started to learn about you and I looked at everything you accomplished, and I love to learn. But man, what you accomplish and what I admire, I get the paperwork, like you were saying, you get the paper, but what to me, and I hope everybody gets this, what this shows me is that you are good at self-mastery. Because, hey, somebody sets the schedule. You still have to get up and show up and sit in the class, listen, pay attention, take notes, do the work, take the tests, progress, and then graduate. It wasn't just showing up in the class. A lot of people show up and want to get paid. They don't want to do the work. So there's so many different things about you that I admire. And I want to leave everybody with this. I love the destination of success, but I'm in love with the journey. I'm able to appreciate you more because I understand what you went through and where you come from. I can look at the degrees and yeah, man, I admire that. That level of hustle is rare, right? That level of commitment and completing. There's a lot of people that start something, but because they're excited to get the degree. They're excited to do something, but they don't have that resolve or that intestinal fortitude or that resiliency and commitment to continue it and see it to completion. Listen, to have 6 degrees means you started 6 different times, and despite any form of adversity, you completed it. That is huge. To me, that is huge. And I want people to see the character that you display, the work ethic, the hustle, the focus. You live in a world that has the equal distractions as everyone else. You said you don't have cable. That's a choice. Other people have cable in their house. They can save the money and get rid of the distraction. That's a choice. You are an example of what different choices can create. Right? You are an example of what self-mastery can do for you, because nobody held a gun to your head and say, hey, man, get this law degree, get this MBA, get that doctorate, do all those things. So as we close this out and everyone remembers this, by the way, everybody, you can go over to the blog, the successsculpting.com. The show notes will be up. The audio will be there. All the links to Dr. Nash will be over there. Get in touch with him. Sit under his leadership, because he goes around the world and he teaches, and now he's accessible to you. If there's anything you can learn from him, hey, you're not going to learn how he studied to get his degrees, but you can learn the work ethic. Because if you have the work ethic backed by the mindset, there's nothing that you're not going to be able to accomplish. Everything that's within your reach will be within your grasp, because there's a lot of things within our reach, but we're just too lazy to go out there and grab it. Right. So that is our responsibility. Listen, man, I absolutely love your story, your hustle. I'm inspired by it. I'm encouraged by it. You got 6 degrees. Give me 1. You can keep 5. You're still ahead. You're still ahead. Hey, Dr. Nash, man, listen, we're going to have to do this again. We want people to be exposed to you, what you represent. You're fun. You're funny. You're intelligent. You got the hustle. You got the heart. You got the vision. Your legacy is going to be amazing. Thank you for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks for listening to the Success Sculpting Show with Stephen Pierce. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, successsculptingshow.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archives of previous podcasts and check the schedule to join us for our next live streaming Success Sculpting Show webcast. This has been a Success Sculpting Incorporated production. Join us next time for another edition of the Success Sculpting Show with Stephen Pierce, and tell your friends.